Welcome everyone to the final panels discussion at DIY Cultures 2017. So DIY Cultures, one of the key aspects of it is about prisoner solidarity, and a lot of it grows out of the communities we built around my brother's detention without trial and eventual extradition to a death row supermax prison where he's held in solitary confinement. And some of these people who showed solidarity during that time, he's home now by the way, still continue to educate me and tend to be the only one who has the Anaraki interest in US political prisoners as me and British prisoners. And one person who's taught me an immense amount is the author of one of the best books on British prisons about the strange way prison trial, which is Nikki Jameson. Nikki's very special to me because she was the first person to write to my brother when he was in solitary confinement in a death row prison, a way against the ignoring the instructions of the middle class lawyers who we think of as heroes. And Nikki is going to start us off with this image of the Attica riot, and she's like an encyclopedia about prisons.
Can you hear me? Encyclopedic on prisons, but rubbish with technology, I'm afraid. Okay, so I'm going to start with Attica. When the prisoners took over Attica prison in New York State in the famous uprising of 1971, in which they challenged state violence, brutality and racism, they declared, "We are men, we are not beasts, and we do not intend to be beaten and driven as such." The entire prison populace, that means each and every one of us here, has set forth to change forever the ruthless brutalisation and disregard for the lives of the prisoners here and throughout the United States. What has happened here is but the sound before the fury of those who are oppressed. Nearly 20 years later, and much nearer to home, prisoners in Strangeways Prison, Manchester, who took over the prison for 25 days in protest against the squalid physical conditions and vicious staff treatment they were forced to endure, held up a banner which read, "Plebeius, of the common people." Sorry, they come quick. And as we sit here today, some 1,000 Palestinian prisoners are on their 4th week of hunger strike in Israeli jails. In a message from prison, Marwan Barghouti said, "Israel cannot silence us, nor isolate us, nor break us. Our will is solid and unshaken, and the occupation tested it time and time again, and was unable to subdue or subjugate us. And we continued to rebel against our captivity and attempts to humiliate us." All of these examples show that prison oppresses and brutalises. However, prison also breeds resistance. Prison is used as an instrument by repressive nations such as Israel to try in vain to contain the struggle for liberation, and by capitalist countries like the US and Britain, both to contain and discipline the working class and to head off any possibility of political fight back or challenge. However, repression, as I said, breeds resistance. And here in an event like this, where we are concerned both with politics and art, I believe we can also say that repression breeds poetry. By poetry, I mean all forms of artistic expression, not just actual verse. Sometimes that poetry is easy to find. Amazing artwork has been produced, for example, by the Cuban Five when they were in US prisons, by Irish prisoners locked up by the forces of British occupation. This was produced in an Irish prison, the slide behind me. By poets such as Hamza's brother, Talha, who wrote poetry from solitary confinement, and by social prisoners of all kinds all over the prison systems of the world. But sometimes it's hard to find the poetry in the cages. And when Hamza asked me to speak today, I said to him, what do you want me to speak about? And he said, talk about the recent wave of prison riots in England. So I thought, okay, I can do that, I know about them, but they're not so easy to talk about. Hunter, respond. Oh, no, back, sorry. Thank you. I write the Prisoners Fight Back page in the newspaper Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, and I wrote the book here on the Strange Ways prison uprising. So I keep my eye on prison protests and I write about any resistance which happens. However, the prison system is a political football when it suits whichever government is in power to use it as such. And last year, it suited the Conservatives to go on a lot about prisons and their version of prison reform, whatever that means. This year, having called the snap general election, they've kicked the political football of prison into the long grass for a while and they're not talking about it. Small and angry demonstrations, disturbances, revolts go on in prison all the time. And it is essentially a political decision by the government and the media as to how much coverage and attention they get. So the ones which took place last autumn, which were the ones I was asked to speak about, did get quite a bit of coverage, unlike, for example, the kick-off at high security prison Whitemoor, which took place last month, which was mentioned in the local newspaper and briefly in the Sun and the Daily Mail, but nowhere else at all. So I'm going to have a quick look at the events of last year, though, although looking at them, when you look at them, you don't see any of the kind of articulation that comes from Strange Ways or Attica or the Palestinian prisoners. You can find no statements, no banners, no messages, no poetry. But I believe nonetheless that any such outpouring of frustration and rage against a brutal and overcrowded system in which prisoners are becoming increasingly desperate nonetheless has its own message and tells its own story. So these are the bare facts. On the 29th of October, 2016, at Lewes Prison in Sussex, a 6-hour rampage, that's what the press called it, took place on one wing of the prison. 3 prisoners faced charges of criminal damage, violent disorder and prison mutiny. On the 6th of November, at Bedford Prison, 200 prisoners took over 2 wings, one of which was heavily damaged. 50 to 60 prisoners were moved to other prisons and 3 faced criminal charges. On the 20th of November, at Moorland Prison in Doncaster, 40 prisoners smashed up a wing of the prison, 30 were moved to other prisons. And then on the 16th of December, at Birmingham Prison, which was previously known as Winson Green, and is now run as a privately run by the security company G4S, 100 prisoners were involved in a disturbance described by the Prison Officers Association as the worst since Strange Ways. 240 prisoners were moved out to prisons across the country as far apart as Hull, Cardiff and Thameside in South London. At least 8 of them have been charged with criminal offences. Finally, for our little count from what went on in October to December last year, on the 22nd of December at Swaleside Prison in Kent, 60 prisoners took over a wing of the prison. And in relation to that final revolt of the year, we have, if not exactly a poem, a description from long-term prisoner John Bowden, who has written extensively from inside the prison system and who was at Swaleside in December. John writes, "Unfortunately, the recent disturbances have generally been characterised more by nihilism and blind destruction than by any of the type of organised and focused protest which was at the core of the 1990 Strange Ways uprising. This in itself is a symptom of the hopelessness and despair that now permeates the prison atmosphere, as evidenced also by dramatic increases in levels of self-harm, suicide and general violence, together with a gang culture that hinders solidarity." So he paints a very bleak picture. But he goes on to say, which is going to be the note I finish on because I was told to speak for precisely 7 minutes, He says, despite the bleakness of the current situation, it remains clear that the collective misery experienced by all prisoners will eventually translate into a common purpose and identity, and that, as in the past, the prison struggle will form an important front in the universal class struggle. My organisation prints a newspaper which always has a page in it called Prisoners Fight Back. There's a page on Facebook which has the same title, and one of the things we've done is work with the Reclaim Holloway campaign as well, who you'll hear from in a minute. I'm quite happy to answer questions or whatever.
We'll do questions at the end. Okay, thank you, Nikki. So I've just been told the hashtag DIY 2017 is number 2 trending in the whole of the UK right now. So thank you everyone, and keep going. So I just a bit of note. There's one speaker who's not on the panel, but is the one I'm looking forward to the most. Who is Safia Khan, the woman from Birmingham who looked the EDL straight in the eye, and through her Facebook stalking, I managed to get her to sort of give the final closing speech. So she'll be speaking at 6:40 p.m. The next speaker is Leah J. Prasad. She's speaking about a political prisoner who should be a household name amongst all of us. Been incarcerated for more than 40 years. So, free Leonard Peltier. Leah's an artist and an activist.
Thank you. Thank you, Hamza, and the DIY Cultures team for inviting me here to speak. In June 1975, 2 armed FBI agents in plain clothes raided Jumping Bull on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota over an alleged theft of a pair of cowboy boots. That was their reason for raiding the place. A firefight breaks out, lasting between 8 and 10 hours. Both agents are killed, and also an Indian male. Now, if an Indian man is killed on a reservation, nobody would care less. It won't even go to trial. But if 2 white FBI agents with 150 backup are killed during a full-scale, 10-hour shootout on an Indian reservation, somebody will pay. Heaven and earth will be moved to make that happen. And if the man who pays is innocent, well, that's academic. It's not funny that Leonard Peltier has been in prison since 1977, but his trial was a joke. I look out here this afternoon and I see such a diverse group of people. We're all of different ages, we're from different backgrounds. But by show of hands, could you tell me who here would say that a red and white van and a plain red pickup truck are 2 completely different vehicles? Yeah, all of you. As I suspected. A friend of mine has a 4-year-old daughter, and I showed her 2 little toy cars. I showed her 1 red and white van and 1 plain red pickup truck, and she could tell the difference between them. So just to be sure, I showed her a plain red van and a plain red pickup truck, and she could still tell the difference. Yet the FBI, specialist police with elite training programs from forensics to language, argued in court that in colloquial language, those 2 vehicles are the same thing. See, after the shootout, police were chasing and looking for people who fled the scene in a red pickup. Leonard Peltier and his red and white van were still on the reservation. Now, if a jury of 4-year-olds would dispute this, then maybe we can agree that a jury of adults were privately coerced. Look, there was an array of bogus evidence and a ton of tampering. A rifle which had its firing pin switched, mass document shredding, and also a witness with special needs who was told she would be put through a meat grinder if she didn't testify. But the reason I'm going on about the vehicle is this. I could read politics when I was 31 at university working as a cleaner. I could research the history between the FBI and the American movement and the conspiracy theories surrounding Leonard Peltier for 6 months. I could write a 7,000-word mini dissertation. I could even visit a Blackfoot Indian reservation in the Rockies and witness for myself genuine devastation of a truly forgotten people. And I did all of that. Or I could just tell you how simple it is, how ridiculous it is, and how a 4-year-old knows better. And that the crime here is an innocent pensioner who is now practically blind and dying, has been beaten, tortured, placed in solitary confinement for up to 6 months at a time in a high-security federal prison for over 40 years. Please take part in my photographic petition. I'm taking pictures of people holding up a sign saying Free Peltier. Some people choose to cover their faces, some people are happy to show their face. We're also raising funds for his defence committee. Please get involved. Leonard Peltier is a talented artist whose paintings are exquisite. I have some of his prints on blank note cards for sale. My lovely brother's over there in the corner minding their store. Leonard Peltier is a man who is working in exchange for his donations, so really this is his dignity as well as his talent. Thank you for listening, thank you for your support. Any questions you have, if you could email me on the European Support for Leonard Peltier Facebook page, I will get back to you within a week. Right, thank you very much.
The next set of speakers is from a group called Reclaim Holloway. I'm sure they can introduce themselves. I'm going to play a short film right now. And I'm playing stuff from the New Year's Eve demo. I don't know if you want to talk over. Just introduce yourselves.
Hi, I am Becca. I'm a member of the Reclaim Holloway campaign.
Yeah, and I'm Harriet. I'm also a member of the Reclaim Holloway campaign.
Just to introduce, this is footage from the first demonstration that we did outside of Holloway prison. The aim of the Reclaim Holloway campaign is to have the prison to be used for collective good. That is for the benefit of the community around the prison, for the whole of London, and also for the benefit of the women that were formerly incarcerated there and have now been moved out. This is footage from our demonstration on New Year's Eve, which is also outside of the prison. So a little, I'll give a few kind of like quick fire facts about sort of the situation that we're in as a campaign and what we're dealing with. So Holloway Prison was the largest women's prison in Western Europe. It was closed in 2016, last summer. It's almost been a year since the prison has been closed. The 600 or so women that were incarcerated there were very quickly moved out of the prison after George Osborne announced on TV that the prison would be the first of inner city prisons that would shut down to free up the land, most likely, we suspect, for luxury flats. When George Osborne announced this, nobody knew. The staff didn't know and the prisoners didn't know that this was going to happen. And they were very quickly moved. Half of the women were taken to overcrowded prisons. They were doubling up in cells. And others were taken to a prison which was not fit for, if any prison is fit for human habitation, but it was still in boxes. The whole prison was still being unpacked, and they were kind of sleeping on sleeping bags on the floor. For a lot of these women, 2 out of 3 women who are in prison are mothers. And for the vast majority of the women that were moved out, this move has meant that they are not able to be in touch as much with their families. The journey, both in terms of time and cost, for their children and family members who are giving them support in particular, has increased massively. For many of them, it's now a 3-hour journey to go visit their mother. And this means that for those women who would get a visit every week, they're now getting one every month, every couple of months when their family can afford to. Alongside the kind of basic indignity of being imprisoned. For the area itself, Islington has the 4th highest rate of child poverty in the country. There are 20,000 households on the Islington housing waiting list. If you walk around Holloway, you see a lot of rough sleepers. And services in the area from austerity and cuts have been decimated over recent years. Sorry. There's a huge amount of need in the area, and this site is 8 to 10 acres of land which is being held by the Ministry of Justice and is likely to be sold to create luxury flats. So this is the context in which Reclaim Holloway was created. We are a coalition of lots of different groups because the land itself and the issue of a women's prison brings so many different social issues together. We have prison solidarity campaigners, housing campaigners, people interested in green space, in food growing, in setting up a women's building on the site, and we work together as a coalition to try and push for our social rent, not at 80% of market rent, and a women's building where women could come to access services, a lot of which were lost through the closure of Holloway. Although Holloway was a horrible place, it did have specialist services which other prisons in the country don't have, and so a lot of mental health services and substance abuse support has gone. So we want the women's building to have some of those services, to house women's organisations, and for women both at risk of going to jail and who have been released to be able to go there to organise, to heal, to spend time with each other and create the things that they want to create as a kind of antidote to what this land was used for before. We also want there to be a legacy to recognise the pain that this site has caused. You will see on the dressing gown in this video, there was a list of all of the names of women that died in Holloway, the most recent person being Sarah Reid. You can look up the Justice for Sarah Reid campaign to know more about her. So yeah, we want there to be a legacy, and then, as I said, there's lots of other kind of local, we're talking to the community amongst other things to talk about what they want, green spaces, better walkways to access the area, and growing food, and lots of other creative ideas. So we're kind of still in consultation with local people about what reclaiming this land means for them and what we can all organise on this land for ourselves. Harriet's going to talk a bit about the demo. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the background of the campaign and kind of what we're pushing for and what we want. With the demos, one thing that we were always really keen to do was to put the voices of the women who had been held in Holloway or had been harmed by Holloway and their families right at the front of that, because that's why the government's able to get, away with so much of the stuff, isn't it? Because these people are locked up elsewhere, they don't have a voice, they're out of sight, they're out of mind, they're some of the people who have been let down most by society. And I mean, it is important that they're not, those prison walls are amazingly porous, and it benefited them so much while they're in prison, but it was an important part that prison was in central London, because it meant they were able to see their families, or it meant they're able to see their kids, and it's just another part of this social cleansing that we're seeing all across London, is that they're pushing even prisoners outside of London. So that was something we were really keen to do. And I think also that makes you start to realise, yeah, how disgusting it is that the government is selling off this land. It's unfair that public land's being sold off, but when you think about all the pain and the suffering and the harm that was done in that place, and the people that were born there and the people that were died there and their stories, you start to realise how gross it is that the government just wants to destroy all of that and pave it and sell it off for private profit. So the ways we did this is at the first demo we had someone who was reading out testimonials, which were really powerful. So they went into Downview, they went to the prisons that the women had been moved out of, and got them to say how it was for them moving out of Holloway and the harm that had done, and we read those out. We also had, we did the balloons that you saw in the video, and that was really beautiful. It was on like a busy main road, but it was still quite dark, and it was just this lovely moment of, well, lovely is quite a poignant moment of reflection and able to commemorate those people that had died in the prison. And then we really wanted to build on that with the second demo. So that's how we came up with the idea of the clothing. So we did it on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is traditionally a time for prison demos, solidarity with prisoners. But normally this is around prisons that are full of people. So Pentonville, just up the road, they had a big noise demo. People go and make lots of noise outside the prison just to be like, we are here, we are with you. And we wanted to carry that on, but it's an empty prison. So we came up with this idea of each taking a piece of clothing that we could leave there. So we felt that would be very personal. And we wrote the stories of people who had been held in prison on those, as well as statistics. And yeah, as you can see, we pegged them up all along the road. And I don't know, I'm probably a bit biased, but I just thought it looked really beautiful. And it's on this busy main road, but to have the candles and all those really intimate bits of clothing was like, I found it really special. So everyone was able to write their own and then peg them up piece by piece. And the idea was that we would create this piece of, it was a piece of public art in the end. It got ripped down pretty quickly. I was gutted. You went on New Year's Day, didn't you? And someone had taken it down already. But even when we were putting it up, we had a lot of people stop and say, oh, what are you doing? And people don't even know that the prison is closed. So that was another big part of why we wanted to do it like that. Anything to add?
The last thing to say is just that the importance of the campaign on a kind of national level is that Holloway is the first example of the government closing inner city prisons to release the land for luxury flats and building mega prisons with minimum 1,000 places outside of cities, further away from communities and support networks and services. So what happens at Holloway sets a precedent for what happens with Brixton, with Pentonville, with Strangeways. And this is why we feel like it's just integral that we, as ordinary people, are able to win something with Holloway, so that we can set a precedent for what happens across the rest of the country. And the money that is gained from the sale of the site will be used to build mega prisons. And this is something that we are also trying to resist, that circulation of cash and increasing the size of prisons to put us in. So yeah.
So now it's time for Q&A. Can I ask people who are sitting at the edge to sit closer to the centre so people from that side can get a seat? Rachel, who's going to wave her hand there, has a roaming mic, so please wait for her because everything is being recorded. So if you have a question, just put your hand up, or contribution or experience you'd like to talk about. Anyone? Okay, there's a question in the middle, so we'll just... Rachel's trying to get to it. There you go.
Hi, yeah, it's not so much a question as just a very short comment. I wanted to mention immigration detention because it hasn't been mentioned by...
Just comment that there was... Jay Jackman was supposed to come here and present her film about Yarl's Wood, but she's had a crisis at the moment, so she wasn't able to. But that was a key part of this. But carry on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so over 30,000 people a year go through immigration detention in the UK. Lots of people who are held in detention are held in buildings that were built as prisons. So like the Verne in Dorset, which was built as a prison, and then they decided it wasn't alright to use it as a prison anymore, so now it's an immigration prison. Some people are also held in kind of regular prisons on immigration grounds, so with like no charge and no conviction. But there were women held at Holloway and at Brixton and other prisons as well. Immigration detention has really also been a site of detainee resistance and detainee organising. And similarly to what you were saying, Nikki, like it's just never reported. We know that in the last couple of months there's been lots of things going on at Moreton Hall, which is near Gatwick Airport. But it's really hard to kind of get a measure on what's happening. We know that G4S, which does kind of some of the managing of the site, like locked about 100 people in the courtyard in the cold and kind of threatened to leave them overnight there out in the rain about a month ago when people were demonstrating about food, something to do with food seemed to be the spark of that, but we're not really sure. And so I think there are loads and loads of links between kind of the kind of criminal prison system and the immigration prison system. And just really quickly, the last thing to say is where people are held in immigration detention is kind of geographically in places which are incredibly hard to get to. So like Yarlswood in Bedfordshire is I guess the kind of most notorious one, but like all of the immigration detention centres around London are maybe a kind of 5-hour round trip to go and visit someone if you're starting out in central London, and that really like means it's completely impossible for many families and friends and communities to be able to like go and visit people. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention immigration detention, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important to bring that into the discussion. I think Nikki.
Hello? Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's really important to raise it. Like Hamza said, we were expected to have a speaker on it. I just want to say that in the paper I write for, we had this thing on Moreton Hall, and that came actually specifically from the demo, like similarly to the Yarlswood demo, which took place yesterday, which take place regularly, which are big. For anyone that doesn't know, they're big demonstrations, but they're both outside and inside the prison because people who are inside participate and contribute to them. After the Moreton Hall one, people were moved away. Now, immigration detention centres are appalling places, like prisons, but the one thing that immigration detainees have going for them that criminal prisoners don't is in a criminal prison, it's actually illegal to have a mobile phone. You can get locked up for more time for it, whereas in an immigration detention centre, not only is it legal, they encourage you to have one. If when you get there, you haven't got one, they'll let you have one. Now that is something that, as activists, we should use to our advantage and become the alternative media that publicises the stories that people phone up and tell, and some people do. And there was at one side of time a blog that just literally reproduced stories like that. But you know what I mean? That kind of stuff, in a way, we've no excuse, because sometimes it's hard to find out what's going on inside a criminal prison. I didn't know about the Whitemore thing I mentioned myself for at least 10 days after it had happened, and I really think I have my ear to the ground. But in immigration detention, we should help to, you know, as Mumia said, be the voice of the voiceless, because people are telling us stuff and we should try to get it out there. I mean, it's brilliant putting things on bits of clothing, whatever the technique is. I think you're dead right.
Any questions or contributions from the floor? There's one at the front, just Rachel. So Rachel's coming to you.
Yeah, just quickly, just seeing the stuff from the Holloway that was being written down about the abuse, and also thinking about the fact that a lot of public land is being reclassified now as brownfield sites. So this is contributing, and it's almost like I can't help thinking about what I know is happening to people in Lambeth. It's almost people are being treated like criminals like someone that I know had their flat knocked down by Guinness. They put private flats up there, right? Then they put her in a place, her rent goes up from £109 to £265 a week, threaten her with eviction, she loses a cafe, and then they say to her, we'll rehouse your children, but we won't rehouse you. So one of the common things about all these people, like I was thinking about Leonard Peltier and Palestinian prisoners, just people stealing land, taking things from us, yeah? So we've got to try to have more sort of solidarity. And I'm just going to quickly say, we've got a stall on Atlantic Road next to a carpet shop who very kindly let us do it, who are also having their rents tripled, big social cleansing. We're linking up with Central Hill Estate, and it's next Saturday, and we're also going to have like Leonard Peltier stuff down there as well. Anyone that wants it, there's a leaflet here.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that? So.
Yeah, I feel like that's it's a really important point. Like both of them, and in a way they connect. Like when you think about the robbery of like although the prison has been used to like Holloway prison has been used to incarcerate people and like wreak havoc and lots of pain in their lives, it is public land, and it won't be soon. And that mass like public to private journey of all of that land is a part of it, as well as like the new prisons. Some of them, not all, will be privately run. And when you think about also the way in which increasingly prisons are being used to detain people on immigration charges, and that like with this hostile environment stuff within the NHS, now that it's illegal to drive without papers, etc., that like being a migrant is criminalised, like increasingly so. And you look at the way that services are being cut, and you look at the way that like human need itself is being criminalised, and then you see that they're building massive prisons outside of cities away from all of our families, and the whole thing looks like quite connected and quite sinister. And so I feel like they're like a lot of those 2 points are quite shared in that sense. If you look at the whole thing kind of holistically.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask contribute to this discussion, which is about representation on mainstream media and film. So the most popular Netflix series is Orange is the New Black. We also see a lot of reality TV on mainstream TV. There's a film about Leonard Peltier with Robert Redford. I'd just like to ask a general commentary on how you think prison is represented in the mainstream media.
It's pretty appalling, isn't it? I mean, like, in general, it's absolutely shocking. If you look at all the documentaries that have been made about Holloway, they're just like they're kind of like glamorised this life of crime and make these women seem to be just totally different people who are just like bad, evil people. It's like that's just not the case, and like the majority of women in prison have just been let down by society, but they're resilient and they find other ways to make a living. And it's like, I mean, I'm pretty new to all of this stuff. I did housing before I got into Becca, like dragged me into doing Holloway organising, and it's just light and day from the public perception.
Thank you. And also, there's an argument on the left about prison abolition or prison reform. I know Nikki is not a fan of the Howard League, so I'd like to just would everyone like to comment on the panel whether they're prison abolitionists or prison reformists, and what is wrong with either? Thank you.
He's really dropped you in it there, hasn't he?
Is this working or not? Yeah. Well, actually, I'm neither, as it happens. I wouldn't say I was a prison reformist because I just think I don't like being a reformist anything. I'm revolutionary, and I'd like revolutionary change. But actually, I don't really class myself in an abolitionist because I think that there's a very sort of naive school of abolitionism that says without making any change to the capitalist system whatsoever, we could close down every single prison and let every single person out tomorrow and it would all be fine. I don't think it would be fine. I think you could probably let out 95% of people in prison tomorrow and it would make no difference whatsoever to the crime rate. And then you could have this really serious discussion about what you were going to do with the 5% of people who have been so damaged by society that they're not safe to let out. But I know that abolitionists are pure, so because I hold to that view, I'm not an abolitionist apparently. But I'm not a reformist because I think that the sort of school of reformism is simply what I said in my talk before. It's a political football. It's a discussion between different vested interests in how to deal with the problems of society, which are inequality essentially, and whether to deal with them by being more brutal or more seemingly kind and caring. And you know, Hamza will wish he hadn't got me started on this because I could go on about it for ages and ages and ages. I didn't really want to talk about the general election. I didn't really want to get into the fact that actually Labour's only sort of positive thing in their touchy-feely lovely manifesto about prisons is that they want to recruit 1,000 more prison officers. That is literally all they have to say on the subject, and that's 1,000 more prison officers, 3,000 more prison officers, 1,000 more border guards, and 10,000 more cops. And all of those joined up things, you wonder what all these more men and women in uniform might be doing to further this agenda of putting the people in the prison that's a long way from the home that they had. But I think, you know, you can campaign for change. That's fine, there's no problem campaigning for change. But you have to realise that there is a political agenda which involves locking up an awful lot of people, and simply campaigning for small changes in it and small improvements doesn't really address that thing. That's why I like this Holloway campaign. I think it's a really good way of linking those struggles together. Actually, at the risk of being pedantic, it isn't the first inner city prison that's closed. Canterbury prison is now student accommodation. Lovely, but it was a prison in the inner city of Canterbury, and you know, they're making this move, and it's a weird thing because abolitionists, revolutionary, reformists, whatever, we'd like jails to shut down. We'd like there to be fewer people in prison. We'd like them to be let out, but at the same time, the idea that you shut them down in order to just build a bigger one somewhere else isn't even reform. Never mind abolition. While I've got hold of this mic, I wanted to raise one completely different thing that I would have done initially if I thought I had time. This is a little piece of legislation which has just popped in to the statute book, and although the government put on hold its prison reform and courts bill in order to have the election, it sneaked through one bit of it, which is the creation of yet more special units, and these are units for extremists, nasty extremists, you know those people, ISIS, whatever, they're horrible and they're infecting the world, and there's a lot of talk about Muslims in prison and how they should be even further isolated. But what I want to point out is that although I'm not in favour of isolating Muslims in prison either, this is primarily this is a racist attack on Muslim prisoners. There's no doubt about this. But ultimately, it's an attack on everybody who has a view, religious, political, or anything else, and wants to express it, and also may end up locked up at any point. And it's an attack on anybody who seeks to politically organise in prison, which is something we're all interested in, is political organisation in prison. Because in this creation of these new special separation centres, it says that you can be referred to them on one of several grounds, and the first you can be referred to it is for in the interest of national security, B, to prevent the commission, preparation, instigation of an act of terrorism, C, to prevent the dissemination of views or beliefs that might encourage or induce others to commit any such active offence. They're getting more watered down as you go through. And D, to prevent any political, religious, racial or other views or beliefs being used to undermine good order and discipline in a prison. So if you're a prisoner and you share your views that the prison is really bad and the food's really terrible and so we should take a stand against it and all refuse to eat it, you may have become one of these subversives who can now be sent to the special unit. This is part of creeping fascism.
I wonder if there's any more contributions from the floor, or just raise your hand. There's one at the front and one at the back, so maybe that one first.
Maybe just a quick thing that I suppose there might be people coming to this talk who don't know so much about the prison industrial complex on the whole, and just to say that there are two, I know of two and there are more, really good documentaries. One is The House I Live In, which is fantastic, which is by the creator of The Wire, I think, and 13th as well, which is done recently. That's it, just to watch them. 13th's on Netflix and the others you can find online. Yeah, or you can watch 13th online without paying Netflix.
Can you pass the mic to the front row, sir? Thank you for that.
Hi, just a very quick question for Becca and Harriet. Just wanted to know what's coming up for the Reclaim Holloway campaign, and also how can people get involved if they're interested?
So we meet on the first and third Wednesday of every month in a community centre which is near to Holloway Prison, round the back of the prison. If you go on our Facebook, which is just Reclaim Holloway, whenever we're having an open campaign meeting, we'll put that up as an event. Things to look forward to in the immediate future, there are various demos and things kind of pressuring different, because we kind of have to game plan it. We have the council to fight, the Ministry of Justice to fight, the Mayor's office to fight, so we're like, we'll be harassing all of them. And the next thing really coming up is that we'll be doing a workshop at the Sisters Uncut Community Festival, which is on the 28th of May until the 2nd of June. I don't know what exact slot we're doing it, but if you go on their page, you'll be able to find it.
Thank you. Is there any more contributions from the floor? Okay. So the one question I wanted to ask was about me and Nikki have many prisoner heroes, and yeah, that's it. Who are your prisoner heroes?
The obvious one, which is Angela Davis, like every day.
Asata Shakur.
Remind Leonard, obviously, and Nelson Mandela, who has been dubbed, by the way, the Native American Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
Russia Today.
It's not the one you're expecting. I don't know what the one you're expecting is, but it's Tala Hassan. And to an extent, his brother.
It's interesting you mentioned the lack of mainstream media representation. We were actually, a group of us, a friend of mine in the front here, on Friday we were protesting outside the BBC, just the complete lack of mainstream media representation of political prisoners. Like you say, there's a documentary on YouTube narrated by Robert Redford, and really some heavyweight public figures are behind the Leonard Peltier campaign, but he's still in prison over 40 years. I mean, where are the BBC? We're licensed payers, whether we watch the BBC or not. Where's the service we pay for? I could go on all day about mainstream media representation, lack of, from Islamophobia to political prisoners. I mean, it's just it's just ridiculous. So the more of these talks and sit-downs we have, you know, and with the magic of social media, hopefully we can get a message out to a bigger group.
Thank you. I was going to say it's not just the mainstream media which is lame and unrepresentative. It's also the leftist media. They are crap. Like you look at, there was a huge prison strike which Nikki's going to tell you about, which absolutely no group in the UK showed any solidarity with. You can go to all these big Trotskyist festivals which aren't as good as this, and there's nothing on prisons. I mean, it's pathetic. I mean, prison is an intersection where everything meets, from social inequality, racism, classism, sexism, everything meets. It's a junction, and yet it's so poorly represented within activist communities. It's always me and Nikki who like celebrate some victory or legal thing or another, and usually no one else. Even, I mean, there was a hunger strike of 20,000 prisoners in Californian prisons in Pelican Bay, launched by the Short Corridor Collective, so in a solitary confinement corridor. Absolutely no solidarity. I had to ask Defend the Right to Protest to recognise it as a protest. There was very little solidarity. I mean, you usually see the exact same people, but I think Nikki's going to talk about that more in relation to the recent strike, which was just this year.
Alright, you must be talking about something. I do want to say, and I don't want to turn into a leftist broadcast, but you know, we are the exception to the rule. Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, Revolutionary Communist Group has covered struggles in prisons since 1979 because we think it's important. Because apart from anything else, if you are an activist, you might end up there someday. And the reason that we covered it was because in the 70s, before, and I'm quite old and even I wasn't involved then, but we supported the struggle in Ireland, and we were supportive of Irish prisoners of war who were locked up in jails in England, and in doing solidarity activism with them, it was they who said, there are other people in here too who may not have been locked up for a political thing as such, but who are involved in struggles for human rights, the struggles against racism. And in fact, that's actually what Leroy's book is about. He's wasn't a political prisoner. He's locked up for shooting at two policemen in Brixton who got in the way of a drug deal. It's not a glamorous crime, but he spent his time in jail both with members of IRA prisoners, Muslim prisoners, becoming very politicised and learning that journey. And it's that I don't want to over-glamorise prison. I don't want to say everyone who's in there's a hero. At the moment, the time that I was talking about at the moment, and the kind of protests that go on at the moment are desperate. It's desperate. There's never been such a high level of self-harm. When you see stuff on the news, I mean, the mainstream media does, you're right, only go for the most nasty things. But when they talk about the levels of abuse of legal highs, bullying of people over drugs, there's self-harm in prison, they're not making it up. It is probably even worse than they're actually representing, because in fact they probably don't even want to let half of what's going on come out. Prison's a nasty, vicious place. But still, even in the middle of all of that, there is political solidarity. There are people whose backs are to the wall, who are organising to protect one another, especially as the comrade at the front said about in immigration detention, more so there than almost anywhere. And it is a duty for people who care about the world to care about the incarcerated. It's not some sort of Sunday issue that we think, I know it's Sunday today, but that you can just care about part-time. It has to be central to what we do. Sorry, I want to ask a question. The question's about Leonard Peltier, because at the time that the Cuban Five, who are on here, were released, and Oscar Riveras and various other US political prisoners were released because Obama, as he left office, decided to do something useful for once and pardoned them. Leonard Peltier was not on that list. And why was that?
Ask Obama. honestly, I mean, it was such a personal letdown. It was absolutely heartbreaking, especially after the bridges he built with the Dakota pipeline. You know, he really gave the illusion of a man who's working in solidarity with Native Americans, and we really thought that if anybody was going to listen, it was Obama. We had the clemency denial. I mean, one thing we are campaigning for now is to at least try to get him moved, because it goes back to what you were saying about people who have to travel hours and hours and hours to visit loved ones in prison. Peltier's family are in South Dakota and he's in prison in Florida. You know, the States is the size of a continent. So, yeah, one thing we are campaigning for, which I did forget to say earlier, is to actually have him moved so at least he can die among family members. But you're right, that why did Obama deny clemency? He's the only one who can answer that. It was absolutely heartbreaking, and for a minute there we really did believe. Yeah, thank you. I know when others were released.
As we've lost our facilitator and the mainstream media is so crap at doing prison-related news, I just thought I'd give a shout out to the black mamas in the US this weekend. So this weekend is Mother's Day in the US, and this group called the Black Mamas that are bailing out women all across the US so they can go and be with their families, which is amazing, and actually at the same time protesting against the cash bail system, which puts people in prison while they await for trial and only lets the wealthy out so they can escape that. So yeah, shout out to them. Now it's on Democracy Now! So they're not all totally shit.
Is there any more contributions from the floor? Okay, Nisha. Where's Rachel? Just use this.
I just wanted to say thanks for a great bunch of speakers and for raising awareness about so many important of the prison struggles. I just wanted to echo, Nikki, what you were saying about the importance of those extreme political prisoners that are used so effectively and so powerfully in the media for gaining popular kind of support for many of the more draconian enhancements to the prison system, the high-profile terrorism suspects who are used so kind of violently, one in terms of the misrepresentation of those cases and the sort of Islamophobia, the condensation of multiple different kinds of political struggles as being just about barbarism and kind of just Islamic extremism. But also to think about what those cases actually do, what the stuff that's legitimated by the state through those cases in terms of the move away from what's already a crap human rights system, but to make that even worse, so that the move away from Europe and the push for the retraction of away from the European human rights courts, which has never worked brilliantly for many of these individuals, but nevertheless totally changes the system in terms of the state being accountable to other kind of powers. To think about what's happened on the back of these cases in terms of citizenship deprivation, as I was speaking about earlier, and the now the retraction of the possibility to strip people of citizenship on the basis of very little, to remove people's passports just on preemptive policing. These are all kind of measures that are legitimated through these extremists, through these subjects that are kind of profiled like Abu Hamza, Halal al-Jeddah, Babar Ahmed, many of those individual cases who are extradited. And I think that's the sort of interconnections between racism, the merging of the sort of the generic kind of racialized representations of prisoners, and then those specific kind of political prisoners is really sort of integral to the way the state is getting away with doing what it's doing.
Andrew's just running away again. I agree with you. When Michael Adebolajo was sent to Broadmoor, the press reported it. This was they could have gone crazy Islamist, nutted off and sent where he belongs, which would have been bad enough, but they didn't. They went, killer of heroes, soldier, sent to Cushy Hospital. Broadmoor is a high security mental hospital, which is a really horrible place to be. It's not a cushy, it's not like being sent to your local hospital. It's just beyond the sort of demonisation of what it can do. But like you say, it's like pick a demon, and if that person can't be treated well, then who can?
Thanks. Is there any more contributions from the floor? Just to say, so the final speaker is going to be Safia Khan, the iconic anti-racist activist who stared the EDL straight in the eye. She'll speak in about 5 minutes, so if anyone wants to see that, just stay seated as you are. I'd just like to thank everyone who's contributed to this brilliant all-female discussion on prisons. Thank you.